You have a incredible graphic. It is the hormonal Charlie's Angels, and I think the visuals are also very helpful. Again, if you're listening on audio, we'll link to maybe this image with your permission
Sure, of
in the show
course.
notes as well. So let's describe this image here, the Charlie's Angels of hormones, as just a little bit of a recap of what you were sharing.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many hormones that are critical for women, but these are the three that I focus on the most as a clinician. So, cortisol is the main stress hormone. It is the priority in the body, and it governs your blood sugar. It's also involved in managing your blood pressure and your immune function. So, a lot of people who uh, are trying to get their hormones in balance and they're making their way through perimenopause, they kind of leave out cortisol, and that's not doing them any service. So, you want to focus on cortisol really first and foremost. So you can get away without having estrogen. Like your body will survive without estrogen. Your body will not survive without cortisol. It is the priority. So it's not a democracy in the body with all these hormones. I would say the two most important are cortisol and insulin. So when you think about the female body and these three hormones, the Charlie's Angels of hormones, cortisol talks to thyroid. So, a lot of women experience, especially after 40, what we call thyropause. So, that's this gradual change in terms of thyroid function. Usually, it's in the direction of low thyroid function or hypothyroidism, can sometimes be in the other direction, hyperthyroidism. And somewhere around 90 to 95% of thyroid dysfunction is related to autoimmune disease. So, I'll just kind of asterisk that. Maybe we can come back to autoimmune disease.
Absolutely.
But thyroid is, pretty much every cell in your body has thyroid receptors. It affects your metabolism. It's kind of like the gas pedal. If you think of your body as a car, it's critical to energy production. And then we've talked a little bit about estrogen. It is the primary regulator in the female body. It regulates menstruation. It builds the uterine lining to prepare for pregnancy if that's something that you want. And if you don't get pregnant, then you shed your lining. It also keeps women lubricated in terms of their joints, in terms of their vagina. It's got about 400 jobs, so I just have two that are listed here. But we want to be thinking about, okay, maybe you notice that your shoulder has become more stiff, like you don't have the mobility that you used to have in your shoulder, or maybe the same thing in your knee or your hip. And if you're someone who's in that age range of like 40 to 45 to 50, you want to be thinking estrogen. You want to be thinking about, okay, seems like my lubrication just isn't what it used to be. And so we can track all of these hormones. We can track these Charlie's Angels of hormones. And then I like to just mention for the guys, I think of it as the three amigos. We want to be really considering testosterone, thyroid, and cortisol in men.
And one interesting thing that I learned from your content is that also for women, testosterone plays a big role in their health. And is it accurate that it's the most abundant, like it's more abundant than
Yes.
estrogen
Yeah,
inside the body?
testosterone, if you're someone like me who gets a hormone panel once a quarter, and you look at the concentrations of your different hormones, the one that has the highest concentration is testosterone. It is the most abundant hormone in the female body. We think of it as a male hormone, but it is so critical for women, so critical. And if you think about confidence and agency and just feeling like, you get up in the morning and you're ready to face your day, a lot of that is testosterone. I didn't pay as much attention to it when I wrote The Hormone Cure because my testosterone levels were fine. And then I found, as I wrote more books, my last book in particular, Women, Food, and Hormones, that my testosterone was on the decline.
Mm.
So that got me to pay a lot more attention to it and to track my levels over time. And then once I dipped below a certain level, I started to use bioidentical testosterone, and it's made a huge difference. So yes, testosterone is so critical. We think of it as important for muscle growth, for it's one of the growth and repair hormones. It's an anabolic hormone. So especially at night, it helps you with seeing a response. If you're someone like me who likes to lift weights, you should see a response. And testosterone is one of the mediators of that. Certainly, it's involved in sex drive. We all think of it in that regard. And that's true for men too, in terms of their um, sex drive, their muscle response to exercise. It's also critical in terms of mood and anxiety. So men need to have a certain level of testosterone, and women do too. So even though men have a lot more, somewhere around 10x what women have, women are still exquisitely sensitive to it. And so we want to make sure that they've got the right amount of it.
That's fantastic. Just a tiny little sidebar, because I'm always getting my labs done. Last year when I turned 40, I was really inspired by a mutual friend of ours to start taking strength training way more seriously than I did, Dr. Gabrielle Lyon. So I did a full body composition measure. I did it right after a big trip to Italy, so that probably wasn't the best idea, but it was very motivating.
I remember that trip. It
I
looked like
came
a lot
in,
of fun.
it was a lot of fun. I had a blast. My wife was there, my friends were there, their wives were there. We had such a good time. A few of the guys were all turning 40. Came back, did my body composition, and was shocked in a good way and motivated in a good way, and also got my labs done. And I saw that my testosterone was in the sort of normal, but not like optimal, right? I think it was like came in around like low 400s, right? And then just through primarily improving my body composition, adding lean muscle mass, strength training as a byproduct of strength training 3 to 4 days a week, because I wanted to take it seriously, upping my protein, which is a big part of it. I kind of grew up under eating protein, and being on a more vegetarian diet. I was vegan for 7 years before I, discovered the world of functional medicine and integrative medicine and completely changed how I operated. And in less than a year, I increased my testosterone by almost 100 points just through that. No testosterone patches, no prescription testosterone. And it's just such a reminder of how powerful the body is when we create the right environment for this. And I can imagine that you've probably had female patients themselves also too, because you're a big fan of resistance training, have seen their own improvements, hormonally, just by putting some more intention into this area of resistance training.
Such a critical point. I feel like in the debates that we have scientifically about low testosterone in men or low testosterone in women, it tends to be this polarized conversation about should we do testosterone replacement therapy? And what gets lost is the lifestyle changes that can really make a difference with your hormones. I mean, if you think about it, the food that you eat is really the backbone of the hormones that you make. And then the way that you are utilizing your body, like if you're using it the way that it was intended, our ancestors on the savannah were not sitting in chairs and sedentary. They were moving around, they were lifting boulders, they were doing what we approximate now with strength training. And I think it's really critical. So to see that kind of change, to have this bump in your testosterone just with lifestyle change, I think is so important. So yes, protein consumption has been shown to make a difference. Reducing sugar has been shown to raise testosterone. The way that you exercise, like with strength training, can really make a difference. And then for some people, even taking some of the precursors like DHEA, which is over the counter, can help to raise testosterone. That especially works in women. It doesn't work quite as well in men. It tends to be aromatized to estrogen, so you have to be careful about that. But I love this point about how lifestyle change can cause significant changes in your hormone levels. And I imagine you felt a lot better too.
Yeah, I felt like there was a little pep in my step.
Yes.
Which is what a lot of people notice. I want to take some of this and I want to contextualize it in your story. And of course, your books where you have fantastic protocols that you've written that women can follow. We have the links to your books in the show notes below. When you went through this moment of having gone to your doctor and him giving you a birth control pill and an antidepressant and saying, lose a little weight, eat better, or lose a little weight and move a little bit more. And you said, there's got to be a better way. I'm sure that sent you down this whole hero's journey where you started to unpack some of the core aspects that were within your control, these different levers that you could start to pull to feel better. And because I've seen you educate to patients, and you're an incredible educator, you're really good about sort of chunking them to help patients figure out where to start first, second, third, and then kind of continue. So, where did you start in your own journey as you started to peel back the layers of the onion and look at this interplay of the hormones and see that a lot of what you were dealing with was essentially, from a biological lens, abnormal version of aging that women go through, and that it didn't have to be that way? Where was one of the first places that you started and prioritized in your journey to make a shift?
The first place was cortisol. So I left that doctor's office and I went straight to the lab. And yes, I've got medical training, and so I could order my own labs. And I realize a lot of people don't have that. But I decided that I was a hormonal hot mess, and I just wanted to see what my levels were. And this is from conventional training at Harvard Medical School and MIT and UCSF. Like, we weren't taught to just run a hormone panel when you don't feel good in your late 30s. So this was a bit of a hunch, but I found that my cortisol was about 3 times what it should have been.
Mm.
And that was my first clue, because my other hormones were off, but they weren't off as much as my cortisol was. So I paid attention to my cortisol because it was 3 times really what I considered to be normal. My thyroid was a little bit off. My TSH was a little bit high, thyroid stimulating hormone, which tells me that my brain was shouting louder at my thyroid to make more thyroid hormone. But I also realized that could be secondary to the cortisol. There's a few other factors involved that we'll get to, but and then looking at my estrogen and progesterone, estrogen was a little bit high compared to progesterone. Again, late 30s, you start to run out of these eggs, you start to run out of ripe eggs, and so progesterone tends to decline. But cortisol can also play a role in that. So it seemed like the primary problem to face first was cortisol. Why am I spending so much time on this? Because I see this all the time in the people that I take care of. More women than men. I take care of both. Women have more dysregulated cortisol than I see in men. So this really high cortisol level, I remember when I first saw it, I called one of my mentors at UCSF, and she's a psychiatrist who orders cortisol on her patients because she uses it as a suicide marker. And she also tracks it in depression because about 50% of people with depression have high cortisol. And she said, "Welcome to the club, Sara. Every female physician I know has a cortisol that's 2 to 3 times what it should be."
Wow.
And I thought, okay, it may be normal, but I don't want to be normal. Like, this was before I saw that study that showed that you can have brain shrinkage in your 40s associated with a high cortisol level. But I had a sense in my 30s that, okay, this is what I really need to manage. I need to get this under control. So I had a little bit in place already. I was already a yoga teacher. I kind of needed it to manage my cortisol. I didn't know cortisol was so high, but I had a sense in my body that I needed it. I really felt like yoga and meditation for me were non-negotiable. And still, I would skip it on occasion. I had 2 kids, like toddlers.
Life was busy.
Life was busy, and I was still working at the health maintenance organization. So I made yoga and meditation non-negotiable, 30 minutes every single morning. No excuses. That helped a lot.
How quickly, if you don't mind me interjecting, how quickly did you notice a difference once you made it a priority every morning, a shift in your mood that you could
Yeah.
notice?
I would say within a week.
Mm.
I mean, and you're a meditator. Yeah?
Not really.
Not really. Okay.
Not really.
Well, have you ever...
I've gone through long periods of my life
Yeah.
where I've been very good about meditating.
Yeah.
I've gone through long periods of my life where I haven't meditated, but I'm not ashamed to say that I'm not a daily meditator.
I really appreciate you sharing that. I think it helps for people who are listening to us and they're thinking, why can't I meditate? So, but you've probably had the experience when you were meditating regularly of some days that just, oh my gosh, it just feels like the stars aligned and you just feel
Mm.
so good after whatever time you committed to meditation. You get up off the cushion and it just, it just feels like, oh, that was a good one. So there are days like that that I think accelerate this recovery with the stress response system, and they create balance between the sympathetic nervous system, kind of the on button of your autonomic nervous system, versus the parasympathetic nervous system, which we're activating with meditation. So there are some days that are better than others, but I would say on average about a week. That's when I really notice a
Mm.
change.
So cortisol was the first place you started, and prioritizing the sort of rest and recovery aspect.
Rest and recovery, and let me layer in a couple of other things. At the time, I was a runner. So I was running about 4 miles 4 times a week. And so when that doctor said to me, you need to exercise more and eat less, and I just knew in my bones that that was wrong, I started to look at the literature on running, and I realized, oh, I'm already a high cortisol person. I go running and I'm raising my cortisol even higher.
Mm.
I wasn't doing any strength training. I was doing chronic cardio at that time, and that was adding to the problem. So high cortisol kind of day in and day out. And I was still 1 foot in conventional medicine, 1 foot in this more functional integrative medicine world. And so I still had this idea, well, is there a pill I could take? So I started looking at the literature on supplements because I was thinking, well, there's all these adrenal tonics, right? Like ashwagandha and ginsengs, and couldn't those help? Rhodiola. And there is quite a bit of literature showing that rhodiola in a randomized trial reduces cortisol levels. We know that ashwagandha seems to reduce cortisol levels, at least in animal models. There's not as much human data, but it's got, thousands of years in Ayurveda of being used. Phosphatidylserine at a dose of about 400 milligrams has been shown to lower cortisol. Same thing with omega-3s, with fish oil is what was studied in the randomized trial. So there are supplements that can help. And so I layered that on top of the yoga and meditation. I changed the way I was exercising. So I still ran occasionally, but I started working out more with friends. And that provided accountability and community and more attending and befriending and kind of conversations about these things. I started doing more adaptive exercise, more Pilates, and ways of working with my core and not chronically raising my cortisol level. So those things together, I would say over about a 6-week period, really made a difference.
Mm.
So I felt a difference at a week with the yoga and meditation, but it really took about 6 weeks to reach this new steady state, this new homeostasis.
And is cortisol, which goes into this whole perceived stress and women experiencing more of this perceived stress and real stress inside of their day-to-day lives, and often the burden of family and sort of world events because they feel everything. Women are much more sensitive in a beautiful way. They notice what's happening in this world. It's their superpower. Do you feel that for most women who are listening today, that often is the best place for them to start? YouTube, if you enjoyed what you just saw, keep watching for more great content on how to improve your brain and your life.
Other women notice it more in their brain. They've got more brain fog. They've got what Lisa Mosconi calls cerebral hypometabolism. You just don't use glucose the way that you once did.